Welcome, dear listener, to a time when candlelight flickered against stone walls, and the pursuit of knowledge carried both wonder and peril. Tonight, we travel back to medieval Europe, where learned scholars sought to unlock nature's deepest secrets through the ancient art of transformation. Let us begin this peaceful journey together, allowing the rhythm of history to guide us into restful slumber in the quiet hours before dawn, when dew still glistened on monastery gardens and the bells had not yet called the faithful to prayer. Brother Aldwin would descend the narrow stone steps to his hidden chamber. The year was 1327, and the world moved at the gentle pace of seasons turning, of crops growing, of knowledge passed carefully from master to student like precious seeds planted in fertile ground. Brother Aldwin was a man of gentle disposition, his hands soft from years of careful work with delicate instruments, his eyes bright with the curiosity that had drawn him to the mysterious art of transformation. The chamber where he worked lay beneath the scriptorium of St. Benedictus Abbey, carved from living rock by monks generations past. Its walls lined with shelves containing carefully preserved manuscripts and gleaming vessels of brass and copper. The morning light filtered through a single narrow window, casting dancing patterns across the stone floor where geometric designs had been carved with infinite patience. These patterns, Brother Aldwin believed, helped focus the mind and spirit during the delicate work of transmutation. The air smelled of parchment and dried herbs, of metal polish and the faint sweetness of honey used to preserve certain preparations. On this particular morning, Brother Aldwin prepared for another attempt at the great work, the noble pursuit that had occupied scholars for centuries, the transformation of base metals into gold. But this was no mere quest for wealth. The learned men of his time understood that such transformation represented something far deeper, the purification of matter itself, a reflection of the soul's journey toward divine perfection. The process began, as always, with prayer and meditation. Brother Aldwin knelt before a small altar where a simple wooden cross stood beside an oil lamp that burned continuously, its flame representing the eternal light of knowledge. He offered thanks for the wisdom of those who had come before him, for the opportunity to continue their sacred work, and for the patience to proceed with proper reverence and care. Rising from his prayers, the gentle monk moved to the carefully arranged workspace where his instruments waited. Each tool had been crafted with meticulous attention to detail, from the copper alembics used for distillation to the ceramic crucibles that could withstand the most intense heat. The furnace, built into the chamber's eastern wall, drew its air through carefully constructed channels that ensured the flames would burn with perfect consistency. Brother Aldwin's methods were those passed down through generations of careful scholars, refined through countless hours of patient experimentation. He began by selecting his materials with the same care a painter might choose pigments. A portion of lead, dark and heavy in his palm, representing the base state of matter. Mercury, that strange metal that flowed like liquid silver, symbolizing the active principle that could facilitate change. Salt, representing the body or physical form that would house the transformation. The bore representing the body or physical form that would house the transformation. The preparation of these materials required hours of careful work. The lead must be purified through repeated melting and cooling, each cycle removing impurities that might interfere with the delicate process ahead. The mercury underwent its own purification, distilled through elaborate glass apparatus until it achieved a clarity that seemed to glow with inner light. The salt was prepared through dissolution and crystallization, creating perfect geometric crystals that caught and reflected the chamber's gentle illumination. As Brother Aldwin worked, he maintained a state of peaceful contemplation, understanding that the success of his endeavors depended not merely on technical skill but on a spiritual harmony between the practitioner and his art. The medieval scholars believed that transformation could only occur when the operator's soul was properly aligned with the cosmic, forces that governed all change in the natural world. The morning hours passed in this gentle rhythm of preparation and meditation. Brother Aldwin moved with the unhurried grace of one who understood that nature's processes could not be rushed. Each step in his procedure was performed with complete attention, whether grinding minerals to the finest powder or adjusting the flames beneath his distillation apparatus to maintain the perfect temperature. Other monks in the abbey above went about their daily routines, tending gardens where herbs grew in neat rows, copying manuscripts in the scriptorium where sunlight slanted through tall windows, preparing meals in the kitchen where bread baked and soup simmered. Brother Aldwin's work proceeded in harmony with these peaceful activities, part of the great tapestry of monastic life where prayer and labor intertwined in seamless devotion. The theoretical foundation of Brother Aldwin's work rested on principles that had been developed by scholars across many centuries and cultures. From the ancient Greeks came the understanding that all matter was composed of fundamental elements that could be combined and recombined in different proportions. Islamic scholars had refined these theories, developing the three principles of sulfur, mercury, and salt that governed all material transformation. Christian theologians had added their own insights, seeing in the art of transmutation a reflection of divine creation itself. According to these teachings, gold represented the perfect balance of all natural forces, the harmonious combination of masculine and feminine principles, of active and passive qualities, of spiritual and material aspects. To create gold from base metals required understanding these subtle relationships and learning to encourage nature's own tendency toward perfection. The process Brother Aldwin followed that morning began with the careful combining of his purified materials in proportions determined by centuries of experimentation. The mixture was placed in a sealed vessel called the philosopher's egg, a rounded container designed to create the perfect environment for transformation. This vessel was then positioned in the furnace according to precise calculations based on the season, the phase of the moon, and other celestial influences that the scholars believed affected their work. The heating process required the most delicate control, beginning with gentle warmth that would encourage the initial combination of materials without forcing changes that might disrupt the natural harmony. Brother Aldwin monitored the temperature by observing the color changes in his mixture, noting the progression from black through various shades of gray and white toward the golden yellow that would indicate success. This phase of the work, known as the nigredo or blackening, could take many hours or even days to complete. During this time, Brother Aldwin maintained his vigil, adjusting the heat as needed, observing the subtle changes in his materials, recording his observations in the careful script he had learned as a young novice. His notes would join those of countless other scholars, contributing to the great body of knowledge that future generations would inherit and refine. The chamber around him seemed to pulse with quiet energy as the transformation proceeded. The light from the oil lamp cast shifting shadows on the walls, creating patterns that seemed to dance in rhythm with the gentle bubbling of the heating mixture. The sweet scent of warming metals mingled with the earthy smell of the stone walls and the faint perfume of herbs, drying in bundles hung from the ceiling as afternoon sunlight began to slant through the narrow window. Brother Aldwin noted the first signs of progress in his work. The black mixture had begun to show flecks of silver, like stars appearing in the evening sky. This was the beginning of the albedo, or whitening phase, indicating that the purification process was proceeding according to the natural order. Each small change filled the gentle monk with quiet satisfaction, confirming that his understanding of the great principles was sound. The work of transformation required not only technical knowledge, but also what the scholars called spiritual preparation. Brother Aldwin had spent years developing the patience and inner harmony necessary for success. He had learned to quiet his mind through meditation, to maintain emotional equilibrium during the long hours of careful observation, to trust in the slow rhythm of natural processes rather than forcing results through impatience or anxiety. This spiritual dimension of the work distinguished true scholars from mere charlatans who sought quick wealth through deception. The genuine practitioner understood that the transformation of metals was inseparable from the transformation of the self. As base metals were purified and elevated to the noble state of gold, so too must the scholar purify his own nature, removing the dross of selfishness and ignorance to reveal the golden wisdom that lay hidden within. The afternoon hours passed in peaceful contemplation as Brother Aldwin continued his vigil. He prepared additional materials for future experiments, cleaned and polished his instruments, and made careful notes about the progress of his current work. The chamber filled with the gentle sounds of his activities, the soft scraping of pestle against mortar, the quiet hiss of the furnace, the delicate chiming of glass vessels as they cooled after heating. Other members of the monastic community occasionally visited the chamber, drawn by curiosity about Brother Aldwin's mysterious work. Brother Dominic, the herbalist, would stop by to discuss the properties of various plants used in the preparation of medicines. Father Thomas, the librarian, would bring newly copied manuscripts containing the latest teachings from scholars in distant lands. These visits provided welcome opportunities for discussion and the sharing of knowledge, maintaining the scholarly community that was essential for the advancement of learning. The evening bells called the brothers to vespers as Brother Aldwin carefully noted the day's progress in his leather-bound journal. The mixture in his philosopher's egg had advanced further into the whitening phase, showing promise for the next stage of transformation. He offered prayers of gratitude for the day's work and for the continued opportunity to pursue this noble art in service of greater understanding. As darkness settled over the abbey, Brother Aldwin prepared the chamber for the night. The furnace was adjusted to maintain the gentle heat needed for the slow continuation of the transformation process. Instruments were cleaned and arranged for the next day's work. The oil lamp was replenished and its wick trimmed to ensure steady illumination through the dark hours ahead. The gentle monk climbed the stone steps to join his brothers for the evening meal, his mind still occupied with the subtle processes occurring in the chamber below. The transformation would continue through the night, following natural rhythms that required no human intervention, progressing according to laws as reliable as the movement of the stars overhead. This was the daily rhythm of Brother Aldwin's life: careful preparation, patient observation, meticulous record-keeping, and always the quiet faith that nature's own tendency toward perfection would eventually reveal its secrets to those who approach the work with proper reverence and understanding. Each day brought small advances in knowledge. Each experiment contributed to the great tradition of learning that connected him to scholars throughout the known world. The sacred art of material transformation in the gentle rolling hills beyond the abbey walls, where morning mist clung to ancient oak trees and streams meandered through meadows dotted with wildflowers. Other scholars pursued similar paths of learning. The art of transformation, known to the learned as the Great Work, had spread throughout medieval Europe like seeds carried on favorable winds, taking root wherever curious minds sought to understand the deeper mysteries of creation. Lady Isadora of Ravenshollow represented a different tradition within this scholarly community. In her private tower chamber, high above the castle courtyard, where knights practiced their sword work and merchants displayed their wares, she maintained a laboratory that rivaled any found in the great monasteries. The daughter of a learned nobleman who had traveled extensively in the Holy Land, Lady Isadora had inherited both his library of ancient texts and his passion for the transformative arts. Her approach to the work differed from Brother Aldwin's monastic methodology, reflecting the particular insights that could only emerge from a different perspective and background. Where the monk emphasized prayer and spiritual preparation, Lady Isadora focused on the mathematical relationships that governed successful transformations. Her chamber walls were covered with intricate geometric diagrams, charts showing the correspondence between celestial movements and terrestrial processes, and tables of numbers that recorded the precise conditions under which various experiments had succeeded or failed. The morning of the spring equinox found Lady Isadora preparing for one of her most ambitious experiments, an attempt to create what the ancient texts called the redstone, a substance capable of transmuting base metals not merely into silver but into the purest gold. This work required materials and techniques that had taken her years to master. Drawing upon knowledge gathered from Greek manuscripts, Islamic treatises, and the oral traditions preserved by traveling scholars, Lady Isadora's laboratory reflected her systematic approach to the art. Every instrument had its designated place. Every material was carefully labeled and stored according to its properties and intended use. Glass vessels from the workshops of Venice stood alongside ceramic crucibles crafted by the finest artisans of Florence. Balances capable of measuring the smallest quantities shared space with furnaces, designed to achieve temperatures that could reduce the most stubborn metals to their essential components. The preparation for her experiment began before dawn, when the first light of the equinox sun would possess the perfect qualities needed for her work. According to the ancient teachings, certain transformations could only be initiated when the cosmic forces were properly aligned, when the influences of sun and moon, planets and stars created conditions favorable for change. Lady Isadora had calculated that this particular morning would provide an opportunity that might not recur for many years. Her materials had been prepared through months of careful work. Antimony ore, mined from deposits deep in the German mountains, had been purified through repeated distillation until it achieved a crystalline clarity that seemed to capture and hold light within its structure. Cinnabar, that strange red mineral containing mercury, had been processed according to formulas, preserved in texts that traced their lineage back to the legendary Hermes Trismegistus himself. Most precious of all was a small quantity of what they texts called virgin mercury, extracted from ore that had never been exposed to the corrupting influence of common mining techniques. This substance, barely enough to fill a small vial, represented years of careful negotiation with traders who understood its value. Lady Isadora had paid for it not merely with gold, but with copies of rare manuscripts from her father's library. Knowledge traded for knowledge in the traditional manner of scholars. As the sun rose on this auspicious morning, Lady Isadora began the delicate process of combining her materials according to proportions that had been recorded in cipher by generations of practitioners. Each measurement was made with infinite care, using balances so sensitive they could detect the weight of a single grain of wheat. The mixing process followed a precise choreography, with materials added in specific sequences, while Lady Isadora maintained a state of focused concentration that excluded all distracting thoughts. The initial combination of materials produced a mixture that seemed to glow with its own inner light, reflecting the perfect harmony between solar and lunar influences that marked this particular morning. Lady Isadora sealed this mixture in a specially prepared vessel, one that had been crafted according to geometric principles designed to concentrate and amplify the transformative forces at work within. The heating process that followed required the most delicate control, with temperatures adjusted according to a complex schedule that took into account not only the time of day, but also the precise position of the sun relative to the horizon. Lady Isadora had developed her own techniques for monitoring these conditions, using instruments of her own design that could detect the subtle changes in light and temperature that marked the progression of the work. As the morning advanced toward noon, signs of transformation began to appear in the sealed vessel. Colors shifted and swirled in patterns that seemed to follow their own mysterious logic, creating displays of beauty that rivaled the finest stained glass windows in the great cathedrals. Each change was carefully recorded in Lady Isadora's notes, contributing to the vast body of observations that future generations would use to refine their understanding of the transformative process. The chamber filled with the gentle sounds of the work, the quiet hiss of carefully controlled flames, the soft bubbling of heating materials, the delicate chiming of glass vessels as they expanded and contracted with changes in temperature. These sounds created a rhythm that seemed to resonate with the natural processes occurring within the experimental apparatus, a harmony between human intention and natural law that characterized the highest achievements of the transformative arts. Lady Isadora's servants, well trained in the requirements of scholarly work, moved quietly through the chamber attending to various tasks. Fresh supplies of charcoal were brought for the furnaces. Pure water was prepared for cooling processes, and carefully prepared meals were provided to sustain the lady during her long vigil. These devoted helpers understood that they were participating in work of the highest importance, contributing their own skills to the great enterprise of expanding human knowledge. The theoretical framework that guided Lady Isadora's experiments drew upon the wisdom of many traditions. From the ancient Egyptian temples came the understanding that transformation required the marriage of opposites, masculine and feminine principles, solar and lunar influences, active and passive qualities. Greek philosophers had contributed the insight that all matter was composed of fundamental elements that could be separated and recombined according to natural laws. Islamic scholars had developed practical techniques for achieving these combinations while preserving the essential harmony that made transformation possible. Christian theology added its own dimension to this synthesis, viewing the art of transformation as a reflection of divine creativity itself. Just as the Creator had brought forth the world from primordial chaos, so too could the skilled practitioner encourage matter to realize its highest potential through careful guidance and proper conditions. This spiritual understanding elevated the work beyond mere technical manipulation, making it a form of prayer expressed through material means. The progress of Lady Isadora's experiment throughout the day followed patterns that had been documented by scholars across many centuries. The initial blackening gave way to the white phase as impurities were removed and the essential nature of the materials began to emerge. Clouds of vapor formed and dissipated within the sealed vessel, carrying away the gross elements that prevented the pure substances from achieving their natural unity. As afternoon sunlight slanted through the chamber's tall windows, creating patterns that shifted slowly across the stone floor, Lady Isadora observed the first signs of the approaching red phase. Streaks of crimson began to appear in the mixture, like veins of precious metal emerging from common stone. This was the moment that marked the transition from preparation to actual transformation, the point at which base materials began their journey toward the noble perfection of gold. The intensity of the process increased as the sun reached its afternoon zenith. The mixture in the sealed vessel began to glow with increasing brightness, as if lit from within by its own internal fire. Colors that had no names in common language danced through the transparent material, creating displays that filled Lady Isadora with wonder, even after years of experience with such phenomena. This was the moment that required the highest degree of skill and spiritual preparation. The forces at work within the vessel were powerful beyond imagination, capable of producing the most marvelous transformations if properly guided, but equally capable of spectacular failure if the operator's attention wavered or her understanding proved inadequate. Lady Isadora maintained her focused concentration despite the mesmerizing beauty of the process, monitoring every detail while remaining alert to the subtle signals that would indicate the proper moment for the next phase of the work. The castle around her continued its daily life as her experiment approached its climax. In the courtyard below, servants prepared for the evening meal while guards changed shifts along the battlements. The sounds of normal activity provided a peaceful counterpoint to the extraordinary events unfolding in the Tower laboratory, reminding Lady Isadora that her work existed within the larger context of human community and daily life. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, the transformation reached a critical point. The red coloration spread throughout the mixture until the entire contents of the vessel glowed like molten sunset. This was the moment described in the ancient texts as the appearance of the Red King, the masculine principle that would unite with the White Queen to produce the perfect marriage of opposites that characterize successful transformation. Lady Isadora's careful observations confirmed that the process was proceeding according to the patterns described by the masters of the art. Each phase followed its natural timing. Each color change occurred at the predicted moment. Each sign of progress matched the descriptions preserved in the most reliable manuscripts. The harmony between theoretical understanding and practical experience filled her with quiet satisfaction, confirming that years of study and preparation had indeed led to genuine insight into nature's deepest secrets. The evening hours brought the culmination of the day's work as the transformation entered its final phase. The brilliant red coloration began to moderate, taking on the deep, rich hue that indicated the approach of success. Within the sealed vessel, the materials had achieved a state of perfect unity, with all opposing forces balanced in harmonious equilibrium. As night fell over the castle and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Lady Isadora completed the heating cycle and began the careful process of cooling that would determine the final outcome of her experiment. This phase required as much skill as any previous step, with temperatures reduced according to a precise schedule that would preserve the delicate balance achieved during the heating process. The gentle lady maintained her vigil through the night hours, monitoring the slow cooling process while recording her observations in the detailed journal that documented years of experimental work. Each notation contributed to the vast accumulation of knowledge that would guide future practitioners, ensuring that the hard-won insights of one generation would benefit those who followed. The wandering masters and their ancient wisdom beyond the walls of monasteries and the towers of noble houses. The transformative arts were also pursued by scholars who traveled the ancient roads of Europe, carrying their knowledge from city to city like merchants trading in the most precious of commodities. These wandering masters represented a different tradition within the scholarly community, one that emphasized the practical applications of transformative principles while maintaining the highest standards of learning and ethical conduct. Master Cornelius the Wise exemplified this tradition of traveling scholarship. His journey had begun decades earlier as a young student at the University of Paris, where he had first encountered the mysterious texts that spoke of material transformation and spiritual elevation. Drawn by an insatiable curiosity about the deeper workings of nature, he had abandoned the conventional path of academic advancement to seek out the hidden masters who preserved the most ancient knowledge. His travels had taken him to the libraries of Córdoba, where Islamic scholars maintained the legacy of the legendary Jabir ibn Hayyan. He had studied in the workshops of Constantinople, where Byzantine artisans had preserved techniques dating back to the alchemical traditions of ancient Egypt. The monasteries of Ireland had revealed Celtic approaches to the transformative arts, while the universities of Italy had shown him how classical learning could be integrated with practical experimentation. Now, in the autumn of his life, Master Cornelius traveled with a small wagon containing the accumulated wisdom of his journeys. His portable laboratory could be assembled in any suitable location, whether the guest house of a monastery, the workroom of a sympathetic nobleman, or even a carefully chosen grove in the deep forest where the influence of civilization would not interfere with delicate experiments. On this particular evening, Master Cornelius had established his temporary laboratory in the scriptorium of St. Augustine's Monastery, where Brother Geoffrey, the learned librarian, had invited him to share his knowledge with the scholarly community. The autumn rains drummed gently against the tall windows, while inside, several candles provided illumination for the careful work that lay ahead. Master Cornelius had agreed to demonstrate one of the fundamental operations of the transformative arts, the preparation of what the ancients called the universal solvent, a substance capable of dissolving any material while remaining itself unchanged. This preparation, if successful, would provide the monastery with a powerful tool for purifying materials and preparing the specialized substances needed for advanced experimentation. The process began with the selection of appropriate materials from Master Cornelius's carefully organized supplies. Each substance had been chosen not merely for its chemical properties, but for its correspondence to specific planetary influences and elemental qualities. Rainwater collected during the spring thunderstorms provided the base material, while salt harvested from ancient seabeds would contribute the stabilizing principle needed to maintain the solvent's effectiveness. Brother Jeffrey and several other monks gathered to observe the demonstration, their faces reflecting the reverent attention appropriate to such important work. Master Cornelius emphasized that success depended not merely on following the correct procedures, but on maintaining the proper mental and spiritual state throughout the process. The universal solvent could only be created by one whose understanding embraced both the technical and metaphysical aspects of the transformative arts. The preparation began with the purification of water through repeated distillation, each cycle removing not only physical impurities, but also the subtle influences that could interfere with the solvent's action. Master Cornelius used apparatus of his own design, glass vessels connected by silver tubes that had been crafted according to geometric principles derived from ancient texts. The entire assembly created a closed system in which the water could be refined to an unprecedented degree of purity. The monastery's evening routine continued around them as the work proceeded. Compline was sung in the chapel, while monks prepared for their night's rest in the dormitories. The sounds of this peaceful life provided a harmonious background for the scholarly activities in the scriptorium, reminding all present that the pursuit of knowledge existed within the larger context of spiritual devotion and community service. As the night advanced, Master Cornelius began the delicate process of introducing the salt into the purified water according to proportions that had been established through centuries of experimentation. This phase required the most careful timing, with additions made at specific intervals determined by astronomical calculations. The wandering master consulted charts that showed the positions of planets and stars, ensuring that each step occurred when cosmic conditions were most favorable. The theoretical basis for this work drew upon the understanding that all transformation depended upon the proper balance of active and passive principles. Water represented the passive, receptive quality that could absorb and contain other substances, while salt provided the active principle that would enable the resulting solvent to penetrate and dissolve materials that resisted ordinary solvents. The art lay in achieving the perfect marriage between these complementary forces. Brother Jeffrey proved to be an apt student, asking insightful questions about the relationship between the practical procedures and the underlying principles that guided them. Master Cornelius was pleased to find such genuine understanding in one so young, recognizing the qualities that marked a true scholar: intellectual curiosity combined with patience, technical skill balanced by spiritual insight, and above all, the humility to acknowledge the vast extent of knowledge that remained to be discovered. The preparation of the universal solvent required several hours of careful work, with each phase flowing naturally into the next, according to patterns that reflected the inherent harmony of natural processes. The purified water gradually took on new properties as the salt was incorporated, becoming clear as crystal, yet somehow more substantial, as if it now contained possibilities that had not existed before. During the long hours of the process, Master Cornelius shared stories of his travels and the scholars he had encountered in distant lands. He spoke of the libraries of Baghdad, where texts in Arabic preserved knowledge that had been lost in the West. He described the workshops of Jewish scholars in Spain, where ancient Hebrew traditions contributed unique insights into the nature of material transformation. Each tradition, he explained, offered its own perspective on the universal principles that governed all change in the natural world. The monks listened with fascination to these accounts of the wider world of scholarship, understanding that their monastery was part of a vast network of learning that spanned continents and cultures. Knowledge flowed along trade routes and pilgrimage paths, carried by scholars like Master Cornelius, who dedicated their lives to preserving and sharing the wisdom of ages past. As dawn approached, the preparation entered its final phase. The mixture and master Cornelius's apparatus had achieved the perfect balance of properties that characterized the true universal solvent. It remained as clear as pure water, yet tests with various materials confirmed its extraordinary dissolving power. Metal filings disappeared without trace when added to small samples, while even fragments of precious stones were reduced to their constituent elements within moments. Brother Geoffrey carefully recorded the complete procedure in the monastery's archives, ensuring that future generations would have access to this valuable knowledge. His notes included not only the technical details, but also Master Cornelius's insights into the theoretical principles that made the process possible. This documentation would join the growing collection of scholarly works that made the monastery a center of learning renowned throughout the region. The success of the demonstration confirmed Master Cornelius's reputation as one of the most accomplished practitioners of the transformative arts. His ability to achieve consistent results while working under unfamiliar conditions testified to the depth of his understanding and the quality of his preparation. The universal solvent he had created would serve the monastery's needs for many years, enabling them to pursue their own experiments with confidence. As the morning bells called the community to lauds, Master Cornelius carefully packed his portable laboratory for the next stage of his journey. His destination was the court of Duke Wilhelm, where scholars from across Europe would gather for a great symposium on natural philosophy. The universal solvent, carefully sealed in specially prepared vessels, would accompany him as a demonstration of the practical achievements possible through dedicated study of the transformative arts. Brother Geoffrey accompanied the wandering master to the monastery gates, where a wagon waited to carry him to the next center of learning. Their farewell was warm but not sorrowful, for both understood that knowledge, once shared, became the permanent property of the scholarly community. The techniques Master Cornelius had demonstrated would continue to be practiced and refined by the monks, while his own understanding would be enriched by the new perspectives he would encounter in future travels. The autumn countryside stretched before Master Cornelius as his wagon rolled along the ancient roads that connected the centers of medieval learning. The trees displayed their seasonal transformation from green to gold, a natural example of the same principles that governed the artificial transformations he studied in his laboratory. This visible reminder of nature's own alchemical processes filled him with renewed appreciation for the profound wisdom embedded in the natural world. The portable laboratory in his wagon contained instruments and materials that represented the accumulated knowledge of many traditions. Glass vessels from the workshops in Venice shared space with ceramic crucibles crafted by artisans who had learned their techniques from Islamic masters. Rare minerals gathered from distant mountains lay beside carefully preserved extracts of plants that grew only in specific climatic conditions. Each item in his collection had its own history, often involving years of patient negotiation to acquire. Some materials could only be obtained during particular seasons, while others required connections with traders who understood their specialized value. Master Cornelius had spent decades building the network of relationships that enabled him to maintain his mobile laboratory at the highest level of completeness. The theoretical framework that guided his work had been assembled from sources as diverse as his material supplies. Greek manuscripts provided the foundational understanding of elemental theory, while Islamic texts contributed practical techniques for achieving difficult transformations. Christian mystical writings added the spiritual dimension that elevated the work beyond mere technical manipulation, making it a form of devotional practice that honored the divine source of all natural law. This synthesis of traditions reflected the cosmopolitan nature of medieval scholarship, where knowledge transcended the boundaries of nation and faith. Master Cornelius corresponded with scholars across the known world, sharing discoveries and insights through letters written in Latin, the universal language of learning. These exchanges contributed to a growing body of shared understanding that advanced more rapidly than any single tradition could achieve in isolation. The journey to Duke Wilhelm's court would take several days, providing Master Cornelius with time to prepare for the symposium ahead. He carried with him not only his experimental apparatus, but also copies of rare texts that he planned to share with other scholars. These manuscripts, painstakingly copied by skilled scribes, represented knowledge that might otherwise be lost if not preserved through multiple copies distributed among various libraries. The upcoming gathering would bring together some of the most accomplished practitioners of the transformative arts from across Europe. Master Albertus from the German states would present his research into the properties of antimony. Lady Theodora of Venice would demonstrate new techniques for working with mercury. Father Benedict from the Monasteries of Ireland would share the Celtic approaches to plant-based transformations that had been preserved in his order for centuries. These symposiums served a vital function in the scholarly community, providing opportunities for direct exchange of knowledge that could not be achieved through written correspondence alone. Practical techniques could be demonstrated, theoretical disputes could be resolved through discussion, and new collaborations could be established that would advance the work for years to come. Master Cornelius looked forward particularly to meeting Master Ibn Rushd, the renowned Islamic scholar who was traveling from Cordoba with reports of recent discoveries in his workshops. The integration of Islamic and Christian approaches to the transformative arts had proven especially fruitful, with each tradition contributing strengths that complemented the other's weaknesses. As his wagon rolled through the peaceful countryside toward the ducal court, Master Cornelius reflected on the remarkable progress that had been achieved in the transformative arts during his lifetime. When he had begun his studies as a young man, much of the ancient knowledge had been fragmentary and poorly understood. Through the dedicated efforts of scholars like himself, working in different locations but united in their commitment to truth, a coherent body of theory and practice had gradually emerged. The road ahead led not only to the symposium but to the continuation of a great tradition of learning that connected the present generation to the wisdom of ages past while preparing the foundation for discoveries yet to come. Each experiment, each careful observation, each insight shared among colleagues contributed to the growing understanding of nature's deepest principles. The sacred geometry of transformation in the ancient city of Chartres, where the great cathedral rose toward heaven like a prayer carved in stone. Master Guillaume the geometer pursued the transformative arts through a unique approach that combined mathematical precision with spiritual insight. His workshop, located in a tower that had once housed astronomical observations, overlooked the cathedral's soaring spires and provided an environment where earthly calculations could be performed in harmony with celestial influences. Master Ghulam's particular genius lay in his understanding of the geometric relationships that governed successful transformations. He had discovered that the proportions used in combining materials, the shapes of vessels employed in various operations, and even the arrangement of apparatus within the laboratory, all followed mathematical principles that could be precisely calculated and consistently applied. His workshop reflected this systematic approach to the transformative arts. The walls were covered with intricate diagrams showing the geometric relationships between different materials and processes. Complex calculations filled scroll after scroll, documenting the mathematical foundations of operations that others performed through intuition and trial and error. Every instrument had been crafted according to specific proportional relationships, derived from ancient sources and verified through years of careful experimentation. The morning of the feast of St. Michael found Master Jim preparing for one of his most ambitious projects, the creation of a philosophical instrument capable of determining the exact proportions needed for any desired transformation. This device, if successful, would eliminate much of the guesswork that had traditionally complicated the practice of the transformative arts, allowing practitioners to achieve consistent results through mathematical calculation rather than uncertain experimentation. The theoretical basis for this work drew upon sources that traced their lineage back to the legendary Hermes Trismegistus, who was said to have discovered the fundamental mathematical relationships that governed all natural processes. According to these ancient teachings, the universe itself was constructed according to geometric principles, with the same proportional relationships appearing at every level, from the movement of planets to the structure of crystals. Master Guillaume had spent years studying these principles in the great libraries of Europe, seeking to understand how they could be applied to the practical work of transformation. His research had taken him to the cathedral schools where geometry was taught as part of the quadrivium, to the workshops of master builders who used sacred proportions in their architectural work, and to the libraries where Arabic manuscripts preserved mathematical knowledge that had been lost in the West. The philosophical instrument he now sought to create would incorporate all of this learning in a single device, capable of calculating the precise conditions needed for any transformation. The device itself would be a marvel of craftsmanship, combining intricate metalwork with carefully cut gems arranged according to geometric patterns that reflected the cosmic harmonies governing natural processes. The construction of this instrument required materials of the highest quality, each chosen not only for its practical properties, but for its correspondence to specific mathematical relationships. Gold would form the primary structure, its incorruptible nature reflecting the perfection that the instrument was designed to achieve. Silver would provide the moving parts, its responsiveness to subtle influences making it ideal for the delicate measurements required. Precious stones would mark specific points and intervals, their crystalline structure embodying the geometric principles that govern the device's operation. Master Guillaume began his work in the pre-dawn hours when the influences of the night sky were at their strongest. According to his calculations, the constellation Virgo was perfectly positioned to provide the cosmic alignment needed for the initial phase of construction. He had waited months for these precise conditions, understanding that any attempt to force the work at an inappropriate time would result in an instrument of diminished effectiveness. The workshop filled with the gentle sounds of precise craftsmanship as Master Guillaume began shaping the golden framework that would house the instrument's complex mechanisms. Each curve and angle was calculated according to proportional relationships derived from ancient sources, with measurements made using instruments of his own design that could detect variations smaller than the width of a single hair. The cathedral bells chimed the hour of prime as Master Guillaume completed the outer framework of his philosophical instrument. The golden structure gleamed in the morning light, its surfaces polished to mirror brightness and inscribed with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and dance as the light moved across them. Each pattern had been calculated to resonate with specific cosmic harmonies, creating a device that would function not merely through mechanical precision, but through sympathetic vibration with the fundamental forces of nature. The next phase of construction required the installation of the instrument's moving parts, delicate mechanisms crafted from silver that had been purified through repeated refinement until it achieved an almost ethereal quality. These components would serve as the calculating elements of the device, rotating and aligning according to input parameters to provide precise measurements for any desired transformation. Master Ghulam's apprentice, young Thomas, assisted with the delicate work of assembly. The boy had shown remarkable aptitude for both mathematics and craftsmanship, qualities that made him invaluable in the construction of such a complex device. Under his master's careful guidance, Thomas learned to handle the precious components with the reverence they deserved, understanding that even the smallest error could compromise the instrument's effectiveness. The afternoon hours were devoted to the installation of the precious stones that would mark the device's scales and intervals. Each gem had been selected not only for its beauty, but for its crystalline structure, which embodied the geometric principles that governed the instrument's operation. Emeralds marked the points corresponding to growth and vegetation, while rubies indicated the positions associated with solar influences. Sapphires corresponded to lunar energies, and diamonds represented the perfect balance that characterized successful transformation. As evening approached, Master Guillaume began the process of calibrating his completed instrument. This required a series of test calculations using materials whose transformative properties were already well understood. The device performed flawlessly, providing measurements that matched theoretical predictions with unprecedented accuracy. Each successful test confirmed that the mathematical principles underlying the instrument's design were sound, and that the construction had been executed with sufficient precision. The completion of the philosophical instrument represented a significant advance in the practical application of transformative principles. For the first time, practitioners would be able to determine the exact conditions needed for any desired transformation through calculation rather than experimentation. This would not only improve the consistency of results, but would also make the knowledge more accessible to students who lacked the years of experience needed to develop reliable intuition. Master Guillaume carefully documented the instrument's construction and use in a detailed treatise that would be copied and distributed to scholars throughout Europe. His work would contribute to the growing body of mathematical knowledge that was transforming the study of natural philosophy, bringing precision and predictability to arts that had traditionally relied on mystery and intuition. The gentle scholar spent the evening testing various applications of his instrument, marveling at the clarity and consistency of the results it provided. Each calculation revealed new aspects of the relationships between different materials and processes, confirming theoretical insights while suggesting new avenues for investigation. The device would serve not only as a practical tool, but as an instrument of discovery, revealing patterns and connections that might otherwise remain hidden. The healing arts and gentle remedies in the infirmary of St. Catherine's Convent, where morning light filtered through tall windows to illuminate rows of healing herbs drying from wooden beams. Sister Marguerite pursued the transformative arts through their application to the gentle craft of medicine. Her approach differed from the grand theoretical investigations of scholars like Master Guillaume, focusing instead on the practical relief of human suffering through the careful preparation of healing remedies. Sister Marguerite had come to her calling through personal experience with the power of transformed substances to heal what conventional medicine could not touch. As a young woman, she had suffered from a wasting illness that left her weak and near death until a traveling physician provided her with a preparation created through alchemical methods. The rapid restoration of her health had convinced her that the transformative arts, when properly applied, represented the highest form of medical practice. The convent infirmary had become renowned throughout the region for the effectiveness of its treatments. Patients who had been given up for lost by conventional physicians often found healing through Sister Marguerite's carefully prepared remedies. Her success came not from any dramatic or mysterious procedures, but from her profound understanding of how the same principles that governed the transformation of metals could be applied to the restoration of health in the human body. The theoretical foundation of Sister Marguerite's work rested on the ancient teaching that the human body was a microcosm of the larger universe, governed by the same forces and relationships that determined all natural processes. Disease represented a disruption of the natural harmony within the body, an imbalance of the fundamental principles that maintained health and vitality. Healing required the restoration of proper balance through the introduction of substances that had been prepared according to transformative principles. Sister Marguerite's library occupied a series of chambers adjacent to the main infirmary, their windows facing east to capture the first light of dawn when many of her preparations were most effectively created. The rooms were filled with the sweet scents of drying herbs, the earthy aroma of mineral preparations, and the clean smell of distilled waters that served as the base for many of her remedies. The autumn harvest season found Sister Marguerite engaged in the engaged for many of her remedies. The autumn harvest season found Sister Marguerite and the clean smell of distilled water engaged in the preparation of her winter stock of medicines. This annual cycle of collection, preparation, and storage represented one of the most important periods in her work, as many of the most effective remedies could only be created when the plants and minerals were gathered at specific times of year. Her morning began with a walk through the convent's medicinal garden, where she carefully selected herbs that had reached the perfect stage of maturity for harvest. Each plant was gathered according to ancient guidelines that specified not only the proper season, but also the time of day, the phase of the moon, and even the weather conditions that would ensure maximum potency. Lavender was cut during the early morning hours when the dew still clung to its purple flowers, while chamomile was gathered at midday when the sun's influence was strongest. The preparation of these herbs followed procedures that combined traditional knowledge with insights derived from transformative principles. Rather than simply drying the plants in the conventional manner, Sister Marguerite employed techniques of distillation and extraction that concentrated their essential properties while removing elements that might cause unwanted effects. Her apparatus included glass vessels designed according to geometric principles that enhanced the flow of subtle energies. During the preparation process, one of Sister Marguerite's most effective remedies was a preparation known as the elixir of renewal, designed to restore vitality to patients whose life force had been weakened by illness or age. The creation of this remedy required a complex process that began with the extraction of essences from carefully selected plants, followed by their combination according to proportions that reflected the harmonic relationships governing healthy bodily function. The base of the elixir was prepared from spring water that had been collected during the vernal equinox and purified through a series of distillations that removed all earthly influences while preserving its essential nature. To this were added extracts of plants that corresponded to the different aspects of human vitality: rose petals for the emotional nature, rosemary for mental clarity, and sage for spiritual wisdom. The combination of these ingredients required the most careful timing, with each addition made when astronomical conditions favored the particular aspect of health it was intended to support. Sister Marguerite had developed her own system of calculations that allowed her to determine the optimal moments for each step of the process, ensuring that the resulting preparation would possess the maximum possible effectiveness. The distillation process that followed was conducted in apparatus of Sister Marguerite's own design, vessels shaped according to principles that enhanced the circulation of vital forces while preventing the loss of the most subtle properties. The gentle heat applied during this process came from furnaces that burned only the purest charcoal, maintaining temperatures that encouraged transformation without destroying the delicate essences being concentrated. As the morning advanced toward noon, Sister Marguerite began to see the first signs of success in her preparation. The liquid in her distillation apparatus began to glow with a soft, golden light that indicated the proper marriage of the various essences. This luminescence was not merely a physical phenomenon, but a sign that the preparation had achieved the harmonic balance necessary for its healing properties. The effectiveness of Sister Marguerite's remedies had attracted the attention of physicians from across Europe, many of whom came to study her methods and learn how transformative principles could be applied to medical practice. She welcomed these visitors, understanding that the sharing of knowledge served the greater good of relieving human suffering. Her influence gradually spread through the medical community, introducing healing techniques based on sound theoretical foundations, rather than mere empirical observation. The patients who came to the convent infirmary represented every level of medieval society, from peasants suffering from the common ailments of rural life to nobles afflicted with mysterious disorders that had puzzled the finest physicians. Sister Marguerite treated each with the same care and attention, understanding that disease recognized no social distinctions and that the principles of healing applied equally to all. Her success in treating conditions that conventional medicine could not address earned her a reputation that extended far beyond the immediate region. Pilgrims made special journeys to seek her aid, while letters arrived from distant lands requesting guidance in the preparation of specific remedies. The convent became a center of medical learning where the transformative arts were applied with wisdom and compassion to the relief of human suffering. Sister Marguerite's careful documentation of her methods ensured that her knowledge would not be lost with her passing. Her detailed notes describe not only the technical procedures for preparing various remedies, but also the theoretical principles that made them effective. These records would serve future generations of healers, contributing to the gradual development of medical practices based on sound understanding rather than superstition. The gentle sister's work represented the highest ideals of the transformative arts, the application of profound knowledge in service of human welfare, the careful study of natural principles combined with practical skill, and the humble recognition that true wisdom lay in working with nature's own healing powers rather than attempting to override them through force or artifice. As evening approached and the convent bells called the sisters to vespers, Sister Marguerite completed her day's work with prayers of gratitude for the opportunity to serve those in need. The elixir of renewal glowed softly in its carefully sealed vessels, ready to bring healing to those who would seek the convent's aid in the days to come. The transformation of simple plants into powerful medicine represented the same principles that governed all successful change in the natural world: patience, understanding, and reverence for the profound wisdom embedded in creation itself. The preservation of sacred knowledge as the seasons turned and years passed like pages in an illuminated manuscript. The scholars who pursued the transformative arts faced an increasingly urgent challenge: the preservation of their hard-won knowledge for future generations. The techniques and insights that had required decades to develop could be lost in a single generation if not properly documented and transmitted to worthy successors. Brother Aldwin, now advanced in years but still active in his underground laboratory, had taken on the responsibility of creating a comprehensive archive of transformative knowledge. His monastery had become a center for the collection and copying of texts from across Europe, as scholars recognized the need to preserve their learning against the uncertainties of war, plague, and social upheaval that constantly threatened medieval society. The project of creating this archive required more than simply copying existing texts. Many of the most important insights had never been written down, existing only in the memories of master practitioners who had learned through years of apprenticeship and experimentation. Brother Aldwin spent countless hours interviewing these elderly scholars, carefully recording their knowledge in forms that could be understood by future students. The challenge was complicated by the traditional secrecy that surrounded the transformative arts. Many practitioners were reluctant to commit their most valuable knowledge to writing, fearing that it might fall into the wrong hands or be misused by those who lacked the proper spiritual preparation. Brother Aldwin addressed these concerns by developing a sophisticated system of codes and ciphers that would protect sensitive information while preserving it for qualified scholars. The archive grew steadily as manuscripts arrived from monasteries, universities, and private libraries throughout Europe. Each text was carefully examined and catalogued according to its subject matter, origin, and level of advancement. The most basic works were copied in clear script, accessible to beginning students, while advanced treatises were preserved in the original languages and scripts used by their authors. Lady Isadora contributed significantly to this effort, donating copies of rare Arabic and Greek texts from her father's library, while also providing financial support for the copying and illumination work. Her mathematical approach to the transformative arts had yielded insights that were incorporated into systematic treatises designed to make the knowledge more accessible to future practitioners. Master Cornelius, despite his advanced age and the demands of his continued travels, took time to dictate detailed accounts of the techniques he had learned in different countries. His descriptions of Islamic methods, Byzantine practices, and Celtic traditions provided a comprehensive view of how different cultures had approached the same fundamental principles of transformation. Master Ghulam's geometric approach to the arts yielded a series of mathematical treatises that would revolutionize the teaching of transformative principles. His philosophical instrument had demonstrated that precise calculations could replace much of the guesswork that had traditionally characterized the field, and his detailed explanations of the underlying mathematics made this knowledge available to scholars who possessed the necessary educational background. Sister Marguerite's contributions to the archive focused on the medical applications of transformative principles. Her careful documentation of healing techniques provided future physicians with reliable methods for preparing effective remedies while avoiding the dangerous practices that had sometimes characterized earlier medical alchemy. The physical creation of the archive required the efforts of dozens of skilled scribes and illuminators working under Brother Aldwin's direction. Each manuscript was copied on the finest parchment using inks prepared according to recipes that would ensure their preservation for centuries. The most important texts were illuminated with decorative borders and illustrations that not only enhanced their beauty but also encoded additional information for those who knew how to interpret the symbolic imagery. The archive was housed in specially constructed chambers beneath the monastery, protected from fire, flood, and human interference by multiple layers of security. The rooms were designed according to principles that would preserve the manuscripts while also creating an environment conducive to study and contemplation. Gentle ventilation ensured proper air circulation while controlling temperature and humidity to prevent deterioration of the precious documents. Access to the archive was carefully controlled, with different levels of authorization required for various categories of material. Beginning students could consult basic texts under supervision, while advanced practitioners required special permission and often had to demonstrate their qualifications before being granted access to the most sensitive documents. The organization of the archive reflected centuries of accumulated wisdom about how knowledge could most effectively be transmitted. Texts were arranged not merely by subject, but according to pedagogical principles that would guide students through a logical progression of learning. Cross-references and commentary helped connect related concepts while warning readers about potential dangers or common misconceptions. The creation of the archive served not only to preserve existing knowledge, but also to stimulate new discoveries. As scholars gained access to texts from different traditions, they began to identify connections and relationships that had not been apparent when the knowledge remained isolated in separate schools of thought. This synthesis of different approaches accelerated the pace of advancement while maintaining the highest standards of scholarship and ethical practice. The archive's influence extended far beyond the monastery walls as copies of selected texts were distributed to qualified scholars throughout Europe. These carefully controlled distributions helped establish networks of communication and collaboration that strengthened the entire scholarly community while ensuring that valuable knowledge would survive even if particular libraries were lost to war or natural disaster. Brother Aldwin's vision of a comprehensive archive of transformative knowledge represented more than mere preservation. It embodied the highest ideals of scholarly community and the sacred duty to transmit wisdom to future generations. The careful organization and protection of this knowledge ensured that the insights gained through centuries of patient investigation would continue to benefit humanity for ages to come. As the elderly monk surveyed the growing collection of manuscripts that filled the archive chambers, he felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that his life's work would outlast his mortal existence. The knowledge preserved in these carefully crafted texts would guide future scholars in their own investigations, while the ethical principles embedded in the archive's organization would help ensure that such powerful knowledge would be used for the benefit of all creation. The evening hours found Brother Aldwin in his private study, adding final touches to his own contribution to the archive, a comprehensive guide to the spiritual dimensions of the transformative arts. This work emphasized that true mastery required not only technical skill and theoretical understanding, but also the development of wisdom, compassion, and humility that would guide the practitioner in the proper use of their knowledge. The gentle scholar understood that the transformative arts, like all powerful knowledge, could be directed toward either beneficial or harmful ends. The archive he had helped create would serve not only as a repository of information, but as a guardian of the ethical traditions that had guided the responsible practice of these arts throughout the centuries. As night settled over the monastery and the last candles flickered in the archive chambers, Brother Aldwin offered prayers of gratitude for the opportunity to serve the cause of learning and for the community of scholars who had made this great work possible. The knowledge preserved in the archive would continue to inspire and guide seekers of truth for generations to come, ensuring that the light of understanding would never be completely extinguished from the world. The transformation of scattered individual insights into a comprehensive body of preserved knowledge represented perhaps the greatest achievement of the medieval practitioners of the transformative arts. Through their patient dedication to scholarship and their commitment to serving future generations, they had created a legacy that would endure long after their own earthly journeys had ended. The gentle twilight of an ancient art as the medieval period drew toward its close and the first stirrings of what scholars would later call the Renaissance began to transform European intellectual life. The practitioners of the transformative arts found themselves at a crossroads between ancient wisdom and emerging new forms of knowledge. The careful traditions they had preserved and refined over centuries would soon encounter revolutionary changes in how humanity understood the natural world. Brother Aldwin, now in the final years of his long life, spent his mornings walking through the monastery gardens where herbs and flowers grew in the geometric patterns that reflected the same harmonious principles governing his laboratory work. The autumn of his days was filled with a gentle melancholy as he contemplated the changes he could sense approaching, transformations that would affect not merely individual experiments, but the entire framework within which the transformative arts were understood and practiced. Young scholars arriving at the monastery brought reports of new developments in distant universities, where natural philosophers were beginning to emphasize direct observation and mathematical measurement over the traditional reliance on ancient authorities. These emerging approaches showed promise but also threatened to dismiss valuable knowledge simply because it could not be easily quantified or replicated under controlled conditions. Brother Aldwin recognized both the benefits and dangers of these new methodologies. His own work had always emphasized careful observation and precise measurement, but within a broader context that acknowledged the subtle influences and hidden relationships that purely mechanical approaches might overlook. The challenge facing future generations would be to preserve the valuable insights of traditional learning while embracing the legitimate advances offered by new forms of investigation. The monastery archive had grown to become one of the most comprehensive collections of transformative knowledge in Europe, attracting scholars from distant lands who came to study texts that existed nowhere else. But Brother Aldwin understood that static preservation, while necessary, was not sufficient to ensure the continued vitality of the transformative arts. Knowledge needed to grow and adapt to remain relevant to changing times and circumstances. Sister Marguerite, despite her own advancing years, continued to develop new applications of transformative principles to medical practice. Her infirmary had become a center of learning where traditional healing methods were refined through careful study of their underlying mechanisms. Young physicians trained in her methods carried this knowledge to distant regions, adapting it to local conditions while maintaining its essential effectiveness. Lady Isidora's mathematical approach to the transformative arts had influenced a new generation of scholars who sought to express traditional insights in the precise language of geometry and calculation. Her detailed measurements and systematic recordings provided a bridge between ancient wisdom and emerging scientific methodology, demonstrating that rigorous investigation could enhance rather than replace traditional understanding. Master Ghulam's philosophical instrument had revolutionized the teaching of transformative principles by providing reliable methods for calculating optimal conditions for various operations. Students could now learn in months what had previously required years of trial and error, while the consistent results achieved through proper calculation helped establish the credibility of the transformative arts among skeptical observers. Master Cornelius, though now too elderly for extensive travel, had established a network of correspondence that connected practitioners across Europe and beyond. His letters carried not only technical information, but also philosophical insights about the deeper meaning of the transformative work and its relationship to the spiritual development of humanity. These elderly masters recognized that their era was ending, but they faced this transition with the same patience and wisdom that had characterized their life's work. They understood that knowledge, like matter itself, must undergo transformation to remain vital and relevant. Their responsibility was to ensure that the essential insights of their tradition would survive and flourish in whatever new forms the future might require. Younger generation of scholars who would inherit this legacy brought their own gifts and perspectives to the work. Some emphasize practical applications, seeking to develop more effective medicines and useful materials through transformative methods. Others focused on theoretical understanding, working to integrate traditional knowledge with the mathematical and observational approaches that were gaining prominence in intellectual circles. Still others pursued the spiritual dimensions of the transformative arts, understanding that the outer work of material transformation reflected inner processes of personal and spiritual development. These contemplative practitioners maintained the connection between the transformative arts and the broader human quest for meaning and transcendence that had always been central to the deepest understanding of the work. The monastery scriptorium continued its vital function of copying and preserving texts, but now also served as a center for translation and adaptation of traditional knowledge into forms accessible to scholars trained in new methodologies. Ancient Arabic texts were rendered into Latin with extensive commentary that explained their relevance to contemporary investigations. Greek treatises were annotated with mathematical formulations that expressed their insights in the precise language preferred by younger scholars. This work of translation and adaptation required the highest levels of scholarship and sensitivity, as it involved not merely converting words from one language to another, but bridging fundamental differences in approach and understanding. The scholars engaged in this work had to master both traditional methods and emerging techniques, serving as interpreters between different ways of understanding the natural world. The influence of the transformative arts extended far beyond the immediate community of practitioners. Merchants who had learned to apply transformative principles to metallurgy and craftsmanship carried these techniques along trade routes that spanned continents. Physicians trained in the medical applications of the arts established practices in distant cities where they adapted traditional methods to local conditions and needs. Artists and architects incorporated the geometric principles developed by transformative scholars into their work, creating buildings and artworks that embodied the same harmonic relationships that govern successful laboratory operations. The influence of transformative thinking could be seen in the proportions of great cathedrals, the layouts of formal gardens, and the designs of illuminated manuscripts that graced the libraries of the learned. The monasteries and universities that had served as centers of transformative learning became nodes in an expanding network of intellectual exchange that would eventually span the globe. Knowledge flowed along these channels like water finding its own level, adapting to local conditions while maintaining its essential character and effectiveness. As Brother Aldwin spent his final years organizing the archive and training his successors, he reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought the transformative arts from the crude experiments of early practitioners to the sophisticated understanding achieved by his generation. Each step in this development had required not only intellectual advancement, but also moral and spiritual growth. As scholars learned to handle increasingly powerful knowledge with appropriate wisdom and responsibility, the gentle monk understood that the work of transformation would continue in forms that might be barely recognizable to those who had established its foundations. But he also knew that the essential principles underlying all successful transformation, patience, precision, spiritual development, and service to the greater good, would remain constant, regardless of the particular methods employed by future practitioners. The evening hours of Brother Aldwin's life were filled with the same peaceful contemplation that had characterized his morning work decades earlier. The laboratory beneath the monastery continued to function under the direction of younger scholars who had mastered both traditional techniques and emerging methodologies. The archive served researchers from across Europe who came seeking knowledge for their own investigations. The network of correspondence maintained connections with practitioners in distant lands who carried forward the tradition in their own unique ways. The transformation of the transformative arts from medieval mystery to emerging science represented the same principles of change and development that governed all natural processes. Knowledge, like matter itself, required constant renewal and adaptation to remain vital and effective. The careful preservation of traditional wisdom, combined with openness to new insights, would ensure that the essential understanding developed over centuries of patient work would continue to serve humanity's quest for knowledge and betterment as the stars wheeled overhead in their eternal patterns, following the same geometric relationships that governed the work of transformation. Brother Aldwin offered his final prayers of gratitude for a life spent in service of learning and truth. The knowledge he had helped preserve would outlive his mortal existence, continuing to guide and inspire seekers of wisdom for generations yet to come. The gentle twilight of medieval alchemy marked not an ending but a transformation, as ancient wisdom merged with emerging understanding to create new possibilities for human advancement. The scholars who had devoted their lives to unlocking nature's secrets had laid foundations that would support humanity's continued quest for knowledge, truth, and the power to transform both the material world and the human condition itself. The eternal legacy of gentle transformation. And so, dear listener, as our journey through the hidden chambers and peaceful laboratories of medieval Europe draws to its gentle close, we find ourselves transformed by the wisdom of these patient scholars who sought to understand the deepest mysteries of creation itself. Their work, conducted in the quiet hours between prayers, in towers overlooking ancient cities, and in libraries where candlelight flickered across precious manuscripts, represents humanity's eternal quest to unlock the secrets of transformation and transcendence. The scholars we have encountered, Brother Aldwin with his quiet devotion, Lady Isadora with her mathematical precision, Master Cornelius with his wandering wisdom, Master Guillaume with his geometric insights, and Sister Marguerite with her healing arts, exemplify the highest ideals of learning and service. Their patient dedication to truth, their careful documentation of discoveries, and their commitment to sharing knowledge for the benefit of all humanity created a legacy that continues to influence our understanding of the natural world. The true treasure they sought was never merely the transformation of base metals into gold, but rather the transformation of human understanding from ignorance to wisdom, from separation to unity, from fear to love. In their careful attention to the subtle relationships that govern all natural processes, they discovered principles that apply not only to laboratory work, but to every aspect of human life and spiritual development. Their methods, patient observation, precise measurement, careful documentation, and above all, the integration of technical skill with spiritual wisdom remain as relevant today as they were centuries ago. The geometric principles that guided Master Guillaume's calculations still govern the proportions we find beautiful in art and architecture. The healing methods developed by Sister Marguerite continue to inspire practitioners who seek to treat the whole person rather than merely addressing symptoms. The archives they created, preserving knowledge through careful copying and thoughtful organization, establish models for how human learning can be maintained and transmitted across generations. Their recognition that knowledge must grow and adapt while preserving essential insights provides guidance for how we might handle the rapid changes that characterize our own era. Perhaps most importantly, these gentle scholars demonstrated that the pursuit of knowledge need not be driven by greed, ambition, or the desire to dominate nature and other humans. Instead, they showed how investigation of natural processes could be conducted with reverence, humility, and a deep sense of responsibility for the welfare of all creation. Their work took place within communities dedicated to higher purposes, monasteries devoted to prayer and service, courts that valued learning and culture, workshops where masters patiently trained apprentices in both technical skills and ethical principles. These communities provided the support and stability necessary for long-term investigation while ensuring that powerful knowledge remained connected to moral and spiritual development. The transformation that characterized their work occurred not only in their laboratories, but within themselves, as years of patient practice developed qualities of wisdom, compassion, and understanding that made them worthy guardians of profound knowledge. They understood that true mastery required not only intellectual advancement, but also the cultivation of virtues that would guide the proper application of their abilities as we drift towards sleep in the gentle rhythm of their remembered presence. We can take comfort in knowing that their work continues in every laboratory where researchers approach their investigations with proper reverence, in every healing practice that honors the whole person, in every educational institution that recognizes the connection between knowledge and wisdom. The soft glow of their oil lamps still illuminates the path forward for those who seek to understand rather than merely to exploit, who value patience over haste, precision over approximation, and service over self-interest. Their legacy reminds us that the most profound transformations begin within ourselves as we learn to approach the mysteries of existence with the wonder, humility, and dedication that characterize these remarkable souls. In the quiet chambers of memory, where their gentle voices still whisper ancient formulas for transmuting the common stuff of daily life into golden moments of understanding and compassion, we find the true philosopher's stone that transforms. Not base metals, but base motivations. Not crude matter, but crude thinking. Not external circumstances, but internal attitudes. May their peaceful example guide us into restful sleep, where dreams of geometric patterns dance behind closed eyelids, where the gentle bubbling of distant retorts provides a lullaby for minds seeking harmony between knowledge and wisdom, and where the eternal quest for transformation continues in the sacred laboratory of the dreaming soul. Sleep well, gentle seeker, cradled in the knowledge that the work of transformation continues in every act of learning, every moment of compassion, every patient effort to understand the beautiful complexity of the world we inhabit. The medieval masters of the transformative arts have completed their earthly labors, but their wisdom lives on in every heart that seeks to transmute the lead of ignorance into the gold of understanding, the base metals of selfishness into the precious substance of love. In the gentle rhythm of breathing that carries us towards sleep, we hear the echo of their furnaces cooling after a day's work well done. Their prayers of gratitude offered in quiet chambers, their satisfaction and knowledge preserved and transmitted to future generations who will carry the light of learning forward into whatever transformations await in the turning seasons of time.